Welcome to the League of Extraordinary Storytellers, the podcast that takes you inside the dynamic world of themed experience design. I'm your host, Theron Skees. In each episode, I sit down with industry experts to explore how their teamwork and collaboration transform ideas into unforgettable destinations. I hope it inspires you to see the world through a brand new lens, one story at a time. Join us as we celebrate the visionaries who make the impossible possible. Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the League of Extraordinary Storytellers. I'm really happy to have you here. And thanks again to the audience for sending such great comments and how much you enjoy the show, for being a brand new baby in the world of podcasts. It's really great to get your feedback. So keep it coming. If you have ideas, if you have suggestions, things you'd like to hear, I'm all ears. Let me know. I also wanted to let you know my book is finally published and it is out there by the time that this podcast releases. It should be coming up live on Amazon. That would be June 18th. All of the pre-orders, for all of you out there who pre-ordered, thank you very much for putting all your faith in me and pre-ordering. All of those should be shipped by now, and I just hope that everybody really enjoys it. That was my passion, along with this podcast and the conversations that we're having. Speaking of conversations, I'm really looking forward to today's podcast with my friend, my colleague, and a master in the industry. Louis Alfieri is joining us, so please welcome him. Louis, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Theron, and everybody out there for having me. It's a real privilege and honor to be here and to be able to have been invited to contribute to the book, which I think, is such a passionate effort that you've put together and such a remarkable opportunity to share knowledge and, inspire the next generations of designer. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's so cool to have colleagues and friends like yourself. In fact, all of the expert contributors to the book really is my whole first season, 14 of you guys. And it was a serious honor for me to have you contribute your mastery level expertise in the book. And I know that each one of you that have joined the podcast now and have contributed to the book, you have a passion for sharing with generations that are coming behind us and individuals that are working in the industry now. So that's kind of I know our shared passion. So, well, Louis, thanks. You've had an incredible career. You're spanning over 30 years, and that's spanned across so many different types of work, attractions, cultural sites, themed destinations, media, based experiences. Why don't you take the audience through a little bit of your origin story? What originally drew you to the industry and really what keeps you inspired today?
Oh, wow. Well, what drew me to the industry in many ways was as a child. The industry represented innovation and collaboration. It represented imagination in so many ways. It was kind of like NASA, Star Wars, dinosaurs, Ray Harryhausen, the future, and optimism all mixed together. It was really an amazing, inspiring, powerful component. And I grew up in a turbulent household, although my folks did the best they could. They were somewhat dysfunctional individuals, and my dad would come to visit 2 weeks a year, and we would go to Disney World. And those 2 weeks a year were like this utopia experience. There wasn't any anger, there wasn't any fighting or many other things that were happening. And so it came to represent a really powerful, positive memory in my life and a way to inspire and to engage. So when I had an opportunity to kind of pursue that as a career person, there was really a place that caught me about the ability to kind of feel that, to do that and participate in that. And as an adult, as a person who's been a career person for many years now, much of that is driven by gratitude. I think it represented such a positive opportunity and such a transference in my life and an ability to go from a difficult circumstance to a career person, to travel all over the world, to work with amazing people and achieve these really remarkable team-based projects, that it's a real driving influence in me to want to provide that for other children that may be in those experiences, to see that opportunity to have that kind of positive experience and really build that kind of positive memory that can change their lives. And I really do believe our industry, whether it's commercial or however else we look at it, really can be a world-changing type of experience. We really have the ability to meet a lot of people on a level that other industries don't, that we can touch people in a meaningful way. We can cross division and bring people together in a really powerful way.
So powerful. Wow. I mean, really, really powerful. It's a solid reminder that what we do in this world of experience creation is really, we talk about emotional connection, we talk about branded experiences. I'm constantly trying to remind our fellow creative brothers and sisters that it's not necessarily all art projects, it's commercial in nature, but you're really revealing a true heart of the escape and play nature of these experiences that we're creating, and that we really have a high responsibility to keep those experiences optimistic, to touch people and provide environments for people that they can really become, maybe the hero of their own story, that they can escape whatever situation that their life is, whether it could be just very hard work, it could be very difficult life circumstances. So I'm so grateful that you bring that up. It hopefully the message that I would want our audience to take away is that it's a heavy responsibility in this industry,
For
because you're
sure.
creating something that stands for years and touches millions of people.
I would say in particular, as a young person, Epcot opened. I grew up in Florida, and Epcot was really a profound aspirational platform for kind of education in the future. I was really fortunate that even though we were quite poor, I got to go to a gifted school for being, qualified as an artist, or spatial design was kind of like where my skill set, or what they identified as my thing was. And going to Epcot was really a blossoming of imagination, kind of looking at seeing what the future might hold, what the technologies, what you could be educated in, and then to visit the world. For a poor kid who couldn't go to any of these other places, to have a taste of Japan, have a taste of Germany, to see what Norway might have been, were really very important seeds to my future as an international designer and creator. That was really one of those places where it went from a book to a three-dimensional environment where I met people. At that time it was all people from that country. You were in an environment that immersed you with that and gave you kind of these greatest hits tastes of what those places might be, and really planted a seed for me to want to travel and work around the world and all of those places. So that park and that time period in that park has a really special meaning in my life.
It's so powerful. It just reminded me, not to make it about me, but to share a story that's a little similar to yours. I grew up in Florida too. I know we're pretty rare these days, Florida natives. And my parents split, and then my mom would offer for Christmas time a choice. You can have presents, or we can all go to Disney World.
Yeah.
So that was our kind of annual trip, because I had three younger brothers, and all four of us always chose Disney World. And we, exhausted our mom and stepdad by going there literally as sun up to sundown. And amazing experience
It's
together.
funny that you mentioned that, because the only two times of the year that our family was kind of normal was Christmas and when my dad came to go to Disney. And at like Christmas was like Star Wars toys or Micronauts, or you could go to Disney. You like, or your birthday. You kind of could choose. Like my birthday was in September, so you got this choice. It's like, well, do you want Christmas stuff or do you want to go to Disney? And I remember, like, I always wanted on my birthday to go to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea because I was a big Jules Verne fan. And that was like the thing, to get to the park, and you rode the ferry across, and we got in there. It was like, I got to go right to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea out of the gate, because that was just such an amazing world, that you got to go to. And, even today, like, I'm so excited. I think about the wonder and the excitement of that were really powerful experiences.
Well, that truly, that background, that growing up experience, obviously informs the person that you are today. And what always impressed me about your work is that I really find it's a unique blend of artistic vision, strategic leadership, and a real care for the people that you work with and your clients. It's not just a transactional business, relationship. And somehow you uniquely wrap all of that in this innovation and technology and that kind of thing. And you've given us a little bit of an insight, so maybe you could expound a little bit more. But I'm really interested. How did you develop that hybrid skill set, and what were some of those additional experiences, maybe that you haven't mentioned yet, that kind of helped shape that?
Well, in my journey as a career, I started at the very bottom of the industry. I started as a concrete sculptor. I was a foam sculptor and a concrete sculptor, and learned to scenic paint, and started as a guy, bending rebar and being a carpenter on site. And some of that grew from my stepdad had come back from Nam, and things kind of would set him off, and he'd break all the furniture. And I learned how to be a carpenter. He taught me to be a carpenter through that process. So I started as a physical tradesperson, as an artist. I got to go to Ringling School of Art and Design, and learn traditional paint techniques, carving stone and casting bronze. And so this was an industry where I could enter and approach those skill sets. But what I learned quickly in that process was, uh, I couldn't design, I couldn't grow if I didn't acquire other skill sets. So it became immediately obvious to me that I needed to learn my teammates' skills to grow my capabilities and my opportunities, within that. So I would befriend the construction guys. I would befriend the superintendent or whoever was doing it. Like, hey man, let me learn about your job. What is it that you're doing? Teach me, mentor me. How can I get better? How can I grow within this? And then obviously there's, as a young person, the aspiration, like, I would love to be the guy who got to design and build this thing. So it was a constant sense of acquisition and learning throughout the process. Each person I would meet, watch, see what they were doing. Okay, I want to be a project manager. I want to be a superintendent, or whatever that might be, to continue to grow the skill set. And then I think likewise, it's really important to share that insight with your teammates. So hey, how do I want to carve concrete, and share that with someone? How can I scenic paint? Because I think when you're all together in the trench, and I think that's what it is, when we get into these projects, it's no one's doing this by themselves. These are projects of thousands of people, no matter what level you get to. It's always a team-based project. And the more you can communicate with someone in their world and they can communicate in yours, the better all of you can work as a team. Like, understanding and appreciating the skill sets of those around you gives you a better ability to communicate, and also to a degree to ask different questions that they might have come up with. Like, what does someone ask you about, hey, how can I approach what you're doing differently? Or when you work with an engineer who, in my opinion, is just as much an artist as a person doing concrete, or a person, as you learn business models, what that is really important to expanding your mindset and your ability to deliver. And I would say, earlier in my career, it was more practical, physical asset, development, like understanding how to build things. And then later in my career, and where I'm at now, it's much more on the kind of financial and government end of things, understanding how do we get financing for a project? How do we build infrastructure in an emerging market, an ecosystem for talent in an emerging market? Uh, but it's always a learning experience. And then on top of that, to your point, are the cultural aspects of learning about each culture that we work in, and try to be respectful to, and learn from, and bring new ideas back.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to get into the collaborative nature of, because you've worked with so many different teams all over the world. I just have one sort of a last question. You were really talking about going sort of the trade route, which I so respect, because that was literally my path as well, not academia, but trade route. And I find it incredibly fascinating that I didn't know this about you, that you started in rock sculpture, because that's where I started, which was, it's kind of amazing. Brothers from another mother.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested. What the picture that I got as you were describing that, meeting with different people and asking questions, and in a sense, you were kind of curating your own mentors as you were going along that path. And you maybe had some. I'd love for you to talk about it. Some actual mentors who were in that role. But the point that I'd love you to talk about is the why it's so essential in our industry today to have mentors, to either go source them yourself or to maybe be in a company or something where you have more of a formal mentor-mentee relationship. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. Well, I think, part of it is curiosity, discovery. I think that's innate in many of us. We were lucky that we're in an industry where people are willing to share knowledge. Not it's not always the case in other spaces. I think it was important that there were people I met along the way that would take time to teach me, to share their insights with me about the things I was doing right and the things I was doing wrong. And those people that you looked at, that you saw, that did an amazing job uplifting others as a platform for their success as opposed to their own success, that really made a difference in your life. I mean, like, one of the people, uh, the most astounding people I've ever met was Catherine John, who I look to as one of the greatest mentors I've had from a creative and leadership standpoint. She would, this was on Islands of Adventure. I was the project manager for the Sinbad Stunt Show. Some part of that I was labor, some part of that I was project manager. Uh, did a lot of things right and made some really big mistakes, like some really stupid things. And Catherine would kind of come out, slap you on the hand and like, Louis, that is not the way to get things done and do things the right way. And then she would sit down and she had the patience. She was like, these are the steps you should take to do things correctly in this environment. And was so patient with saying, not just berating you, but like, hey, you need to take this as a learning exercise and advance and go forward. And I would say the same, has been true with opportunities working internationally, like working in Japan. When you go over there as a young person, the first time I get off the plane, I can't read, write, or speak. You're illiterate. It's astonishing and very humbling to go someplace and realize like I'm like not even an elementary school person here, and to try and navigate a world where you're very dependent on the people around you. Like, your skill set is valuable there, but then I need to depend on others to teach me, like, how do I communicate with the team? What's the proper role with which I should address an issue here? And again, did many things right and made some really profound cultural mistakes that informed the future of my career, where I said or did things or didn't understand that, in Japan, this is the way things are done. We don't do it that way. And to understand how to listen and observe at another level than what people would teach you, like, it's not direct like it is in the West. You must have many meetings and reach consensus to get to a point when everyone agrees privately that we can agree publicly on how to move forward on a particular project. And those benefit you later on, those lessons that you've learned. When you have problems, whether you're working in China or Indonesia or Vietnam or Saudi Arabia, all of these lessons that you learn along the way from the people who teach you become valuable opportunities to approach challenges differently in other plays and other projects. And likewise, when you return home, to see that maybe a little slower path and consensus in the United States is helpful versus a bull in a china shop trying to force things through sometimes.
I love the fact that you mentioned this benefit of working internationally in different cultures and adapting and really adjusting your approach and how that actually benefits you when you come back to your home country and working there. I love that. I had a similar experience when I worked international, and the people that I know that have had those global experiences all kind of share a similar experience and how it actually made their approach very different. I love the contribution that you made for my book, and it was you were really one of the aspects you were focusing on collaboration, and one of the aspects that you focused on was the importance of clarity and mutual understanding and transparent communication. And I love the way you said that those things, among many others, I'm sure, but as a primary point, they foster the best collaboration on teams. And what I would love for you to do is talk in a little bit more detail. You gave some examples, especially working in Asia or Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, how different that is. How do you establish trust when you're leading culturally diverse teams on these global products?
I'm going to kind of start and then tie back in what our previous conversation, because I think they're relevant to each other. Trust is the bedrock of how these projects work. You can't build without trust, and our industry is a business of relationships. You building relationships with other human beings, with brands, with cultures, with different disciplines that you're doing, because we're all interdisciplinary artists and creators in this space. So what's important initially is to really not go in and bully your way around, but to listen, to sit down, to ask people what they need to succeed, as especially now as a business owner and executive producer and consultant. I'm a platform for other people's success, and just as Catherine was for me, to kind of say, these are the things you need to do, is to understand that we need to listen to others, and there are many more things than just what we say in other parts of the world. Where in the West, we're primitive in some way, and that it's a lot about words and what we write in the contract or what we're doing. But in other places in the world, sounds and body language speak a lot to what's happening in a conversation that we have to learn to interpret, and we need to leave space in the team for trust and their skill set. I am not the most knowledgeable guy on the team. You have to go into this understanding that all these people in the room have all these amazing skill sets, and they have other backgrounds and things that they've done in their life that are remarkable, that they can contribute to the event. And also they all have challenges in their life. They've come every day with what's happening in their family or their life, and to recognize, what's happening in the bigger picture.
That's a great
I
perspective.
really ascribe to the notion that General Patton spoke about. Uh, Tell people what you want, not how to do things. They'll amaze you with their ingenuity. And so what I try to do is always tell the team, this is our goal. This is the vision. This is our goal of excellence and what we want to do with the guests and what we want them to remember or to feel. And I want you to take what we began as an initial point. And Joe Rohde speaks to this a lot, who's like the guy that I look up to, in the industry, is like he's like my Van Gogh in the theme park space. Uh, he always speaks about the need to leave room in the project for it to expand and develop through its inception. Like we begin with the seed of an idea, but you have to allow the idea to grow and to flourish and to change and move in direction. It's a river, it's not a fixed destination, and so that's really critical to build that into the team possibility. And going back, I know I'm talking about a lot of mistakes, but one really big mistake I had made on Rocket, which was the first social media coaster. Like we're a bunch of young people. I had a bunch of young guys who had never done an attraction before. It was kind of a very, I say that because it's about to close, so it's an apropos time.
This is
Uh,
at Universal Studios, right? Just to be
yeah,
clear.
correct. When I was the creative director at Universal, so Rocket had a lot of innovation in it. We were trying to do a lot of things that really weren't fully understood at the time in terms of mobile delivery, co-created content, social media, a very vast group of characters that were representative of a wide population. Uh, and there was no social media, no influencer, none of that at the time. We were trying to pick up on what young people were doing about creating content. So we were making this like behind the scenes video and we were like doing a commando. There was no budget. We were all doing it on our own time. Uh, and we were trying to like emulate what we saw in like making of DVDs behind the scenes, right? So we have all these drawings and I'm talking and I really put my foot in my mouth a couple of times. We were talking about like what my vision was as a director, blah blah blah. And Mark Woodbury, my boss at the time, pulls me in the office. He goes, "I don't think you realize on your own what you're doing, but I versus we is really important. It's understand the difference between using I versus we, and when we talk about things." And it was like the minute somebody said something, it was such a profound lesson because I felt like such a jerk. Like, man, I didn't even mean it that way. Like it was totally unintentional. But until someone brings it up to you and kind of the light bulb goes off and then you're like, oh, wow, of course, this is a group effort, how we're doing this and creating this. And so, we tried to adjust accordingly. But I'm rambling. I'm sorry. But it was, uh, really important lesson to understanding this kind of building trust, and even how we communicate using those words about building that trust within the team, and then translating that internationally into working with others and understanding even basic choices in words when we work in other cultures have a great deal of significance that we may not initially be aware of ourselves. And that also brings up the translator. The translator on an international job is easily the most important person on the site. Their ability to articulate your idea, articulate meaning, or communicate challenges culturally from the team that you're working with cannot be overstated enough. Like, that person is the linchpin to the success of the project and can save or waste millions and millions of dollars and days and months on a project if words or content are incorrect. Numerology is such an important part of Asia and Chinese culture, as an example, or and it's different between each country. Like the number four in Japan means death. It has a different connotation in China. When we talk about eights and nines of luck and importance in China, things we don't attribute. And I guess 13 is probably the most significant number in the U.S. But the importance of those kinds of things being shared and listening to people and be willing to receive information that you wouldn't normally absorb yourself or be aware of are really important. And those, each time you pick up those skills or you listen to those, you're also building trust within the team, the organization, the culture, and the ecosystem that you're a part of.
I love the description of the ecosystem because it really is this, to build a team, and you have to have a team, as you've aptly described. It's never done by one person, and that team requires trust and really cross discipline collaboration to be able to get these things done.
Correct.
Pardon me. And doing that in an international way just really levels up all of those challenges. And trust is certainly a big part of that. Communication is a really big part of that as well, as you've described. Do you have any other thoughts on maybe even some practical examples of how did you do that? How did you pull that together? Certainly, it's not, you fly over, land on the ground, and the whole team is there and ready to go. It definitely takes time to build that trust, to foster that relationship. What kind of practical steps would you know, want to present to kind of make sure that that alignment happens between, say, creative, technical,
Oh,
and the owners or operators?
I think that it's a multifaceted answer in different ways in different environments. I would say my approach as a project leader is to make sure that all of the stakeholders are present through all the decision making processes, and that open communication amongst teams is absolutely necessary. It's really critical to have representatives of each of the disciplines contributing throughout the process. You need creative, you need operational, you need technical, you need financial, you need brand ownership, depending on what the nature of the project is. Earlier in my career, it was really focused on creative, technical, and operational before I kind of grew what my skill set was. And the ability to ensure that these projects don't work if all of those disciplines aren't operational and successful. If you could build the greatest project in the world, and if it doesn't operate well, it may look cool, but it will close. It won't work. For
Right.
these projects to work, they need a vision that we establish and touch people with. We need technical excellence for safety, for consistent operations, and then brilliant ability to get people through it. And then the obvious point is, if it doesn't make money, it won't stay open. So and you need to also a degree. I find it's essential to have an owner with a will to pursue a project's excellence. There are owners who good enough is enough, and then there are owners who are like that. That's excellence is essential, and that makes a big difference in what the project is. But that communication has to be a two-way street where we're sharing information with them, they're sharing information with us, and we're likewise treating everyone on the project with the same degree of respect. Everyone plays an equally important role, whether it's the guy bending rebar, it's the person taking waste off the site, to the person that's making decisions at the corporate level. Everyone makes a really important contribution, and we have to communicate with respect amongst everybody, be open to ideas, have an open door policy is essential, I think, to allowing that. Communication isn't restricted amongst groups. And I would say, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur in the space, I run my company as a distributed talent model. Our team is all over the world. There are very few people in New York. There are people in Shanghai and Canada and in Europe. Uh, the team is like a film crew. They come together with different disciplines to deliver different projects. You need to have a group of people who are willing to be proactive in driving communication and seeking information, that want to reach out and ask questions that you can answer and engage each other. And I would say an entrepreneurial mindset helps with that. People in film, theater, and the theme park space are engaging individuals. They're not waiting for direction generally. They're proactive. And I think that's really important, is to go out and seek answers, seek information, seek communication to share, because it's essential for us to not work in a vacuum, to be able to deliver these kinds of projects. Just as we're here now, the tool sets now give us a lot more availability to that kind of instantaneous communication opportunity, whether we're in the same room or not. And that's not to say, I'm not a person who advocates, okay, we'll never get together. I think there are opportunities now with the way we work, where charrettes, key decision moments, or key milestones, we have to all be together to execute those. And obviously, when we're installing on site, that's essential that we're all together there. But there are also opportunities now where individual talents, or maybe people who aren't the most social but are super creative, or whatever their discipline is, can work remotely and bring their information together in ways that we've never had before. The notion to have a digital whiteboard and Slack channel and all this happening, and 3D models that we can negotiate all over the world together, really has changed the nature of, you don't have to be in Los Angeles anymore to be a creative. You don't have to be in New York. We have this amazing opportunity with these new tool sets to express ourselves, to share information, and to communicate in ways that were never available before, that I think really gives us new opportunities for new voices, new creative avenues, and new experiences for guests. Because I think that's, as we'll get to perhaps later in the conversation, the industry is evolving to create new forms of engagement for the future, that I think these technologies give us remarkable opportunities for.
I couldn't agree more. I'm actually really grateful that you brought that up because, we've been talking about collaboration, and there's probably not too many people on the planet who work in a business environment that wouldn't agree that collaboration is important. But I think in our industry, and I believe you've said this, it's a requirement. You can't deliver what we do unless you have a really good model, a good ecosystem of trust and of collaboration. And when you just made me think of an additional question, because I've seen some of this in my own work when using these great tools that are available. The virtual conferencing, like we're basically doing now, the virtual whiteboards, and shared platforms where people can contribute together, or maybe even virtual platforms where you can review drawings and models and designs together. The tools are really great, but what are some tips that you have on keeping those communications still open and personal with your team, even though your team is distributed or decentralized in different locations? How do you ensure that you guys as a team, you stay close and you stay connected?
Big question. It's at the root of our success or failure as a team and as a company. I find what's essential is that you, at least in the nature of what we do as a company, as I do as a business owner, you have to have a couple of key individuals that are kind of what I call the hub of the wheel, that help drive that. So I always think the way we function as a company is, there's a hub, there are spokes, and there's the perimeter. And that you have to have, the team is kind of driving the wheel around, like you're that's how the energy of what we're doing. But you need someone that kind of helps hold it together and kind of keeps touching point with all the individuals, drawing them back and forth, from, say, a producer level or a creative director or a triumvirate of a project manager, creative director, and producer. And again, depending on the nature of the project, mixed use will have a finance person, real estate person, whatever that might be. But that core group of individuals is really engaging the entire ecosystem around them. There's a pivotal need for them to be strong communicators to ensure that the creative intent is being shared amongst the group, and in some cases, identifying if teams or individuals are not engaging each other enough to drive the opportunity to, hey guys, we all need to get together and circle the wagons and sit down and talk about what your issues are, and ensure that we're really making a collaborative effort to drive this together. It can't be done in a vacuum. There may be moments, in our case, that teams may work on individual assets or components for a week, maybe. And it also depends on the speed. A week in Saudi Arabia is 6 months in the United States. We have to behave in a different pattern of understanding the culture of where we're working. Uh, but you need to make sure that there are certain individuals that are observing it at a high level from an intent standpoint to ensure that nothing's getting lost in translation along the way. I find there are also, in the way that we do things, you need certain gates to go through where you're ensuring that there are primary milestones that the client is expecting of you, but then there are tertiary milestones and that you are working on internally. That you're going through moments where you're ensuring that everyone is going through reviewing the drawings, that they've gone through the model, that they have spoken to each other, read the brief or whatever that might be, or what the updates are. Uh, and again, it's about communication, making sure we're all working on the same version of the drawing. And again, this is facilitated much in an easier way now with some of these digital platforms, that if you're in a BIM model, it's being updated and you can see what hour a person was in there at last. That was challenging, more challenging 5 or 10 years ago. And, when I started the company 13 years ago, that was a much more molecular process to driving, hey, making sure that someone signed out the drawings, that they marked them and that they initialed them. Now it's a much more of a real-time process where we're facilitating. That comes with its own issues, though, too. If someone changes something that they shouldn't without having authorship, that there's like, okay, you're moving columns around. We can't move columns around in the building. That you have to make sure that there's, again, communication with the facility team and the creative team, that we aren't engaging in license for things that we can't do. So you need multiple sets of eyes. I think you need checks and balances to ensure that we're staying on point, that we're moving effectively, and that we're moving in unison.
I think it's such a great message that you're bringing up. I know that both of us often talk to the next generation, or future generations that will be professionals in this industry, and we have a list of things that we try to communicate to them so that they feel well prepared. And one thing that you brought up there that I haven't really heard mentioned before, and I have neglected to mention it, and I just want to focus on it because I think it's so important, is that not just communication being integral to a team's success, but this discussion that we were just having about leveraging all of these tools to communicate as a team, and but being the glue in the team, being somebody who, if every member of the team, especially when they're distributed or located in different places all over the world, looking out and keeping an eye out for their fellow teammates and helping to keep the team connected and glued together, it's a really important skill set that these new generations, these new professionals that are coming up, that's something that you and I didn't have to think about. We were, in a construction trailer, or we were in a conference room or something, but now is a very different working ecosystem. And I'm just really it's thoughtful that you brought that up, because I think that's really important point to drive.
I do think it's more natural to the younger generation because they're native to these platforms. You and I are the last people in the analog world, right? We are the people who saw the computer come up, and we went from, and this is an interesting conversation again for perhaps later. We transcend traditional tools to digital tools to artificial intelligence tools. We have transcended these massive changes in technology, going from hand-drawn blueprints to CAD to what will be essentially holographic models very soon, in terms of transportation and what that content is. Young people today uh, are innate in the fluency of translating these tools and seeing that. What they are not fluent in is communication with each other, which is very
Right.
fascinating. We as individuals engaged in a world where calling up somebody and talking to each other was an innate behavioral pattern that was part of our world. Uh, Today, I'll have my daughters sit in a room and three of them want to text each other, but they really don't talk, in some ways. Yeah, it's interesting that I think we have to draw young people into an engagement sphere
Yeah.
where they're willing to talk to each other, engage in problem, and not just send a note in Slack and expect that it will get done. We have to approach it in a way of kind of driving not the innate understanding of the platform or the technology, but the human element of it that we have to foster, which I think in some degrees in the digital separation does get lost. And so, you know, they are somewhat more uncomfortable in a charrette room experience than they are in working individually. Like
Right.
it's interesting. Some people of our age or ilk feel as though you can't do a project if you're not all in the same room, right? Which I really disagree with.
Yeah.
And I find that young people are uncomfortable when put into the group experience sometimes. So again, it's a question of how do you build the team, the ecosystem, the talent pool that you have, whether it's an experienced space, if we're in London or New York or Los Angeles, or we're in Saudi Arabia where the ecosystem doesn't exist yet, where we're building a talent ecosystem, or how the evolution of the ecosystem changed in China over the last, 15 years of being engaged in that country's development of an entertainment ecosystem. I mean, you have to read what those situations are in the moment, and then how do we react to adjust for what those individual scenarios, or whether it's an age culture or a local culture, how do we adjust for that to deliver the kind of project that we're expected to? You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of money involved. For better or worse, I do miss our industry being more original. Much of the current state of the industry is IP driven. And to your point, or to the point earlier, Epcot, when I was younger, and Magic Kingdom were more archetypal concepts, bigger ideas in terms of what storytelling and content was. It wasn't all IP, even though IP was layered. It was much more archetypal storytelling, Greek and tragedy with heroic journeys. Now a lot of it is purely story driven, but um, you have to understand the nuance of what that means in a particular culture, how you're delivering that, and adjust accordingly to ensure what that is. And to the point I was making, I got off track. We're dealing with a lot of other people's money. There is an expectation, not only creatively and emotionally, but financially, that we're going to hit a deadline. We're not an auteur. We're not making film where we can kind of do what we want to some degree. We have to not only create a piece of media content, but we have to deliver a building that's structurally sound. We have to build a ride system that's technically safe and operational. We have to deliver a physical environment that people can negotiate 12 hours a day, 365 days a year, and infrastructure and work in the city and transportation. It's very multifaceted. And so that communication and that ability to bring all these diverse talents and people together is essential.
No, it's great. I would love to. I was wanting to transition into sort of those new tools, the technological advancements, the innovations, AI. I know this is a space that you speak about quite frequently, and you're very adept at that. And what I think is amazing about what you just set up was you can't really talk about new tools, AI, et cetera, without talking about the society that is coming up with them, the human component of
Correct.
that. So I'd love to move into that discussion and talk a little bit about as AI continues to evolve, as these new tools become available, how do we, as professionals, do they get layered into our process? And how do the diversity of the generations and the skills, the disciplines on a project like this, how do they work together? And the most important part is how do we keep authentic, great storytelling and not make it all about the tools. If you could talk a little bit about that, I think that would be awesome.
Well, there's a lot there, man. We could do a whole session on all that.
True.
Well, I'd say first and foremost, I'm a huge advocate of the new tools. The AI tools I think are remarkable tools that are going to there is a risk and reward to the tools. They are on a philosophical level. I believe that the new tools can lead to a democratization of creative content lead to a new renaissance. You think about any person who's a writer or a person who's a concrete sculptor that couldn't design can now, in a manner of speaking in words, design whole attractions, in a way that wasn't an opportunity afforded to us before. On
Right.
a on a philosophical level, on a world leadership level, abuse of those tools is problematic. And I say that, and the relevance to this conversation is we are like music and film and sports. Our work that we do is an equalizer to society. People come to the park regardless of religious or government belief. We all get together in this space and we all have an experience together that's not a segregated experience. We can leave politics outside of the theme park and we can all have a good time together and we can bring people together in a positive way. Some of these tools can be used in ways where I think the social contract is at risk. What is when we all grew up in a world, and up until today, all humans, uh, story has been generated as a passive content. 3 acts, 4 acts, whatever that might be. Which I'll talk to in a moment. How I think the technologies give us a huge opportunity there. We've also grown up in a world where we believe what we see. We know what we hear. We know what we see. We are at a moment with this technology, which I'll leave off here after this, entering the post-truth world, where what we don't know what to trust. We don't know what it is that we're seeing or that we're hearing. What is authentic content now becomes, in that way, as a society, as humans, potentially very challenging. I don't know how we're going to evolve from that. I think it will take a lot of people much smarter than I am to figure out how we're going to solve that. But I do think our industry plays a role in showing how we can use this technology in a positive way, and how we can bring people together using it versus using it as a tool to divide them. I think, in the terms of the technology and where it's going, story has always been linear. It hasn't been created in real time. We talk about a film right now. Right now, as we sit here, you can now go on a number of programs and you can change all the characters in movies to you and your friends. Put your faces, your body in the film, and it will produce the entire Lord of the Rings with you and your brother and your mother replacing the characters. Use your voice, and it's you in the film. It's amazing. Any film that I'm a Godzilla fan, a huge Godzilla. I could be Godzilla. I can be one of the characters in Godzilla. I could be the little girls riding on Mothra, whatever it is, just for fun. What we have now with the use of AI and the game engine is the ability to create content in real time with no latency at population scale. So we're not talking about 3 act structure. I'd say the most advanced thing in the theme park industry from that perspective at the moment is the Star Wars attraction, where we have a single story arc that goes from beginning to end, but it's a variable story arc at different points along the way. So we can go to meet different characters, we can go to different planets, we can have different experiences on the planets, but our journey as a rebel character goes from a beginning to an end on an arc that we create. When you play a game like, if you're familiar with Red Dead Redemption or Ghost of Tsushima, those are very complex, multifaceted, open world formats, or even Grand Theft Auto, that you can go and kind of behave in any way you want in an archetype structural world that you can behave in any way. It's like in the Westworld in a digital format. We are nearing the point where some of those parameters can be adopted in the theme park or Broadway or film market. I see in the future the ability that we won't even have a restraint in that way, that we'll be able to create experience in real time. So you could have a personalized library that you could go to a dark ride and have it completely do content based on things that you put into it, and each vehicle that goes through could have a unique adventure within that content generated in real time for the entire population that's going to the park. There wouldn't be limited to a particular project. And in an AR format or in a VR format, we will be able to, and perhaps with a Tesla suit, I don't know, I know it's not the company Tesla, but there is such a thing called the Tesla suit, where we could take the portfolio of assets of rides that have all been built before, like maybe they don't exist anymore. For instance, like oh, I want to say it's Inner Journey, and I know I'm saying it wrong. It's an old Disney ride. I never got to experience it as a child. You went into the human, not Body Wars, but let's say Body Wars, just for
Oh,
that
right,
one.
right.
Okay, so Body Wars doesn't exist any longer, or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and we'll be able to buy a portfolio of assets that you'll be able to feel in the suit and see in the glasses. So we could allow people not to leave their home, but to go and transcend that experience. I do think on that level, and I speak to this as a person who was a disadvantaged poor child who could go and afford once or twice a year to go to the theme park. It disappoints me to think that the business model of the parks is changing to a degree where I think in the future only affluent people will go to the real park, and that the middle class and the lower class are likely to only get this type of digital experience where they'll
Mm.
pay for a subscription, pay for this to see these experiences in this kind of digital engagement format. It's wonderful that I think those formats will exist and they will give that opportunity to people. But I think missing out on that kind of physical immersion uh, will be somewhat disappointing. But through this end, my point being the idea of having multi threaded, co created narrative, co created experience is the future of the industry. And now we have the ability to generate that at population scale with no latency, which is a remarkable addition. We think about this could change, has the potential to change humanity. Story has been from the fire until now a linear concept. The idea of creating story, besides what we're doing orally, like when we're telling story or making a story, the idea that everyone can create their own story, uh, it's kind of like being in the Matrix. It's pretty incredible what that affords us, and it could be a renaissance of creative opportunity and expression.
I think that it is fascinating to when you really start to dig into that and see the scale and the impact on humanity, because we're not just talking a single industry. We're really talking about a pretty large impact, not just for the people like ourselves at this current moment who are creating and building and developing these experiences that are in large form destinations, physical location-based entertainment, and the thought that it can grow and evolve into many of the areas that you mentioned. I think that puts a big responsibility on those of us that are, leading the way right now. Those are who are helping to establish something for future generations who may be living in that society. How do we ensure that we do our very best to keep it optimistic, right? That was the thing that Walt Disney was known for, is optimistic storytelling, the happily ever after, the architecture of reassurance, as it were. How do we, or can we, as influencers, as leaders in this industry, how do we try to communicate that to others so that because these tools could be used in a not so nice way that would create some pretty nefarious examples out there. How do we influence to keep it positive and to keep it growing and exploring, but staying true to the mission of dimensional immersive storytelling?
I think it's about hope. When I think about what the park represented, the experience I had as a child that drew me to follow a career, and I'm, incredibly grateful for what that emotion and that content was, is we have a responsibility to think ahead to others and what it is we want to leave behind as a legacy, what our impact on others is, which is beyond shareholder value and bottom line. I think, it's not to say you don't want to make monsters and human centipede or whatever it is but I think we have an obligation to the future generations to do the best job we can in anything we approach. We should approach this like the national parks. We need to do something that's big greater than ourselves.
Right.
I think hope and aspiration, whatever we do should have that kind of quotient where we think about that. We want to deliver memories that are impactful on people. And that doesn't necessarily mean I think that it has to be. I don't think Halloween Horror Nights as a aspirational concept, but I think it's something that's fun that people engage in. That there's a human emotion driven. People like fear. They want to be scared. But we want to do it in an environment where they're having fun. They're safe. They know that we're having a shared experience together, and we're all scared together. We're all having fun, and we're going to leave, and we're going to have this great memory together that we're going to continue to have for the entirety of our lives. That we're going to sit down together at Thanksgiving 20 years from now. And do you remember when mom did this, or when she's left us? We're going to remember that memory that we had. And I think it's very important for us to see that these tools are a mechanism to deliver those kinds of memories, and that our responsibility is to design with those memories in mind, to think about the audience. The industry at the moment is very focused on shareholder value. There is an intent right now that everything, to a negative degree, in my opinion, has become very short-sighted about only IP, only merchandise pushing. Shareholder value is a short-term aspiration. We've lost the sense of, particularly in the theme park industry, that sustained high-level profit is acceptable. I'm going to say this as an old guy, it crushes me that
Yeah.
we're getting rid of Rivers of America and the quiet part of Disney World. Now, I am not saying we shouldn't monetize Disney World. I'm not saying it shouldn't be expanded. I'm not saying waste space. But I think one of the unique aspirations, and it's interesting that Mark and the team at Universal have gone the opposite direction with Epic, that they put the park back in theme park at the same time that the Magic Kingdom's getting rid of the park, is an interesting exploration of where the industry is at. Uh, Shareholder value is necessary at the scale of what investment in our projects is. But Wall Street is a short-term monetization strategy. It's not a long-term sustainment strategy. And to sustainability is something we may touch on here before the conversation ends. Our industry needs to grapple with sustainability as well.
Right.
But financial and creative stability or sustainability is essential. And I think we need to begin kind of stepping back a moment to understand that if we make 30% a year over year, and we're talking about millions upon millions, maybe we have to limit the scale of investment. Maybe we can't do a $2 billion land every 5 or 10 years. But we need to think that this is an industry that's capital expense intensive. It's capital expense critical operationally and maintenance wise. We need to identify that you can't keep delivering less and squeezing more out of the patrons. We're delivering less perk. We're delivering, no longer is it, the free fast pass. We're monetizing every instance of the day. And I think it's taken some of the magic away from the experience, some of the escape from the real world. I think for this industry to survive, it needs to maintain that sense of escape from the pressures of regular life
Yeah.
to keep it a global destination industry that's essential. I'm not saying you shouldn't be profitable. None of that. We're business people, but there's a point where you have to realize, okay, 30% profit, and we're talking about billions of dollars, is okay. It doesn't have to be 30, 35, 40, 45. It's not realistic to kind of consider that. And I would say different than the film industry too. I remember sitting in a meeting, I won't say names, with an executive from one of the major film studios. And he was reporting to the CEO of the conglomerate. And the conversation was, well, tell me, we're going to build a land in Malaysia, and we're going to get $25 million of profit over 10 years for the use of 5 or 6 of our IPs, right? This is the CEO looking at the person who represents location-based entertainment. And he says, help me out here. If I deliver the film of this IP, I could make $250 million in a weekend, right? When I
Right.
do the film. Why do I want 10 years of risk for $25 million when I can do it in one weekend? So, well, that's a choice you make. You need to understand that there's a difference in the kind of model and the kind of business that we're in. It's not a 1 week film. It's not that kind of model. If that's the way you want to do your profit model, then that's the business you should be in. You shouldn't be in the other business. We are a long-term investment. We are a long-term. You can't build these things for 1 year. They have to last 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 55 years. I think Disneyland is approaching 70, at the moment, or, Knott's Berry and others are nearing a century mark. But I think we need to, from that responsibility standpoint,
Right.
we need to approach it in that way. Uh, and sustainability is something our industry needs to reckon with. As a tourism entity, we use a lot of material. We use a lot of energy. We use a lot of water. We use a lot of consumables. You think about the carbon footprint of a theme park in the context of people flying there is astonishing compared to other industries. We are not, as of yet, particularly conscientious as an industry to think about, single-use plastics. There are things we need to be doing from a responsibility standpoint, thinking about the generations ahead of us about how do we use material more wisely? How do we not generate so much garbage, in a world that's changing where there may be resource limitations?
Some huge questions there. And I think that you've hit on a few things that really encapsulate the industry as a whole. And I think it's great to expose audience members to the larger industry, the worldwide industry, some of those challenges on budgeting and shareholder value and decision making at the top. If you're just starting out in the industry, you're a graphic designer sitting in a cube in a construction trailer and you're trying to get the signage designed. I've always contended that it's very important to have a broad view of the industry, and tried to represent that in my book so that people can navigate their careers with more accuracy, understanding the big process, understanding the big industry, and that so maybe things don't surprise them when they happen. And I would say a lot of the things that you were just talking about could represent multiple sessions, multiple episodes for us to discuss because there's some really deep stuff in there. What I would love to do is wrap up our conversation and bring all of that back down to the individual audience member. There's so much that we've covered, which has been awesome. We've talked about collaborating, the dynamic type of teamwork that goes on in a team ecosystem with so many different roles and disciplines. We've talked about, and which is a major focus this month for my content, which is working globally. The industry is global, telling stories that resonate globally. How do we work as a team that way? And we've really focused a lot on technology and the different influences that a very, I would say, geometrically expanding technological universe is impacting our industry and how to work with that. I would love it if you could refine that into some thoughts that we would leave with our audience members, whether they're existing pros in the industry, whether they're new pros that are coming into the industry. What are some practical thoughts that you would have for them? What do you tell people when you talk to them about how to leverage these things to their benefit in the industry?
I would say, as a talent in the industry, always keep learning, like always keep expanding, keep asking questions. Uh, Try to build a personal board of advisors, 5 people that you can talk to that are at different levels than you, people above you, people that are of a different talent set, that are invested in you as an individual, who will spend time with you, or will answer, questions for you, that will engage you in a meaningful way, that care about your progress, and don't be shy about asking.
Mm.
I think it's important to talk to someone who's like a marketing person, a person who's a technical person, a person who's about kind of where your career arc, like they're ahead of you on their career. A person who knows you, knows your history as an individual, that's invested, whether it's your wife or your dad or someone, but someone who says these are the things that are your strengths and weaknesses that you need to work on personally, and then as a career, who's seen you work, that says these are where your shortfalls are and the things you need to work on. I think that personal board of advisors is important, that everyone should have. I think right now you need to learn game engines and you need to learn AI. Like your career will not progress if you don't know those. But that doesn't mean I am. I have kids that come in all the time. They don't paint. They don't touch natural material. AI is not the end of design. It's actually going to enhance the importance of creativity and curatorial content, because there's going to be so much of it. How do we discern what's of value and what's important? So the creative director, the producer, the project manager, actually, I think is going to increase in value, but it's going to challenge entry level positions because people, I already have owners. I have every owner I go to now asks me three questions. The first question is, how does your company use AI? How are you going to use AI to do my project faster and cheaper? And how are you going to replace all my employees with AI? I have every owner asks that question. It's amazing to me.
Wow.
I don't see it. I don't believe that that's going to happen. But I do think that entry level positions are going to be dramatically impacted by the perception that these tools can supplant entry level positions. So you're going to need to become a native adopter and be ahead of that curve to create value and to enter this piece, whether you're an older professional or a young one. It's just an essential skill set that
And
you've
just
got
to
to have.
interject, it's not. I don't think you're saying. I don't want any audience member to lose this. It's not really fully focusing on just the AI tools or the innovative tools, but it's also remembering some of the fundamentals
Uh,
of the
Absolutely
industry. It's a theatrical, cinematic
correct.
industry.
You need to understand design principles. Just because AI can produce something, I still think you should paint, you should draw, you should pick up a saw. I think my benefit to the industry in many ways comes from having been a tradesperson. Understanding in the field how to build something profoundly benefits the impact of what I do as a designer. And I think I wish there's a lot of, when we all came in the industry, was happenstance. We kind of all fell into the theme park industry, or the theater industry, or I think more people were going to school and intended on being in the film industry. Many of us are kind of, ships that were lost at the sea that found our way to a place where they would accept us and we could do something cool. Uh, uh, there's more academia in our space now than there was. It's a career choice where it wasn't before. But I think it's really important that that doesn't get lost. That people, the trade of what we do is really critical. And I think it's important that people should do that. Traditional tools, digital tools, AI tools, all should be used together. They don't supplant one another. Uh, I think that this notion of seeking out a mentor is critical. I mean, even as I grow as an individual, I'm still seeking mentorship. I think there are so many things I could do better than I do. I'm actually, later this month, there's a person who owns an international marketing firm. And I'm sitting down with and asking him to be a mentor on the things that I think I'm really falling short with. We don't know everything. And I think it's really important to go out and ask for help and realize that we need to continue to grow and expand and improve ourselves. I think is the whatever level you're at as a career person. As an older career person, many of us are experiencing an interesting shift. I see ageism as an older person is increasingly prevalent. We're at an age where it seems the Gen X guys are, 53, 55 to 60. A lot of people are aging out and there's a lot of young people being hired.
Right.
It's interesting trying to understand as a person our age as the industry is shifting, how can we continue to add value and a contribution and a legacy to the space? Uh, it's challenging because a lot of people I see a lot of people right now as the industry is going through a contraction. How do they find a way to have a job? I think that's where this kind of understanding of communicating and networking, and I think we haven't talked about that today. Networking and relationship building is absolutely foundational to your career in this industry. Go to events, talk to people, ask questions, participate, speak, go to events. I think speaking is also important. Teaching someone else or speaking to other people is very humbling in realizing I really have to get my shit together if I'm going to try to explain to somebody else what we do or how we do something in a way that it adds value to them. And I would, to that point, it's not about you. When you speak or when you mentor or you make these contributions, it's a contribution to those people and you being a platform for their success. When I go speak at IAPA or TA, I don't talk about the company. I don't talk about things we're doing. I'm not trying to, I mean, it would be nice if we got a business out of that stuff, but it's, I'm there to give value to the audience. I'm there to give information that should benefit someone else. And again, when I think back to Catherine, the time she took with me and said, this is how you do it. These are the things you do. That's our role. If we get to the elevator and we get to the top, or we climb to the top of the hill, we need to reach down and pull up as many people as we can on that journey because all those people that helped us. And I think
Love that.
that that's essential.
It's so great. And that's a perfect way to wrap up our conversation. This mindset of staying focused on helping others, not just drawing from others and not giving back, but having it be like ripples in a pool, right?
Right,
You're
right.
giving out to others, and as you learn things, it's important to communicate with others and not only learn from them, but maybe they can learn from you as well. And that I love that reciprocal ecosystem that you've described. I think that's amazing. Well, at the time flew by as it always does. I would love to, if you're open for it, give our audience members maybe a way to get a hold of you if they want to connect with you and talk through social media or whatever. If you don't mind, just some ways that our
Sure,
audience.
sure. Well, I mean, obviously, anybody can connect with me. It'd be wonderful. Let's all connect on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I'd say that's the platform I'm probably most active on. Reach out. My cell phone's public. Text me, email me, whatever it is that you need. I'm happy to answer any question to contribute. I mentor at several universities. If I can contribute to the program in any way, I'm happy to. I really love being engaged with folks and trying to, you know, help them achieve their dream. And if there's anything I can do to support anybody, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to engage, participate, and contribute in any way.
Fantastic. Well, Louis, thank you very much for being a guest on my show, for representing so well, this era that we represent, this age, but also having such a good handle on um, this concept of giving back. Really love that. It's been a real pleasure to have you on, and thanks so much to our audience. Make sure you tell others about the podcast if you've gotten something out of this. If it's resonated with you, please let other people know so that they can also tune in and enjoy as well. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Theron. Thanks, everybody.